Pod Apostle. Help us build the kingdom. Like, share.
So you should all be familiar with Jonah, right? It's fresh in your minds because we just read the book of Jonah last week. And so there is something greater than Jonah here, to say the least. Jonah was very self-involved, He wasn't charitable in his work at all. He really wanted to see the people punished. And Jesus is completely the opposite. And Solomon, think about Solomon. Solomon was given a tremendous gift. First, he was the king, and he was given this incredible gift of wisdom. And he used the kingdom that David had established and the gift of wisdom in such a way that the nation of Israel reached its apex, its highest place, its most influence, its most power. And the Queen of Sheba heard about how great Solomon was and how great his court was, and she said, I have to go see. And she went and visited him, and she said, as impressed as I was from the stories that I heard, what I have experienced is even greater. And so the Queen of Sheba came and saw the wisdom of Solomon. But what happened to Solomon? Solomon had a fall as bad or worse than Adam. Solomon fell off the cliff, completely disgraced. He was so bad in the end that his sons were so corrupt that the nation of Israel was split, and the rest is history, if you will. And Jesus is not, when he says there's something greater than Solomon here, there's something greater than Jonah here, yeah, a little greater, like infinitely greater. But the people were moved by Solomon, and they were moved by Jonah. But the folks there are not moved by Jesus. And so he is really kind of rattling them. And they would have known about Jonah. They would have known about Solomon. And so Jesus is the greater than. He's greater than the temple. He's greater than the manna. He's greater than Solomon. He's greater than David. He's greater than Adam. He's greater than Abraham. He's all of those Old Testament figures. I have to talk a little bit, just a minute, about St. Paul's letter to the Romans. If you heard when Bill introduced the reading, a reading from the beginning of the letter of St. Paul to the Romans. We're going to be reading, here's your homework, the letter of Romans. Chris O'Keefe is doing a Bible study on the letter of Romans on Tuesday evenings at 6 o'clock. So if you want to come join that Bible study, well, the next few days, we are going to be reading through St. Paul's letter to the Romans at Mass. Every first reading is going to be St. Paul's letter to the Romans. And we have this introduction, Paul, a slave of Christ, an apostle, set apart for the gospel. And it's a kind of just a summary, kind of introducing himself and talking about what he's going to be writing about. And he says, the gospel about his son descended from David through the resurrection of the dead. And so he mentions that Jesus is a descendant of David, King David. Jesus is priest and king. That's one of the points that Paul is making here. And that he rose from the dead. And Paul is always hitting you over the head with that fact, that Jesus rose from the dead, right? And this is what made the philosophers and whatnot scoff at him. He's like, the resurrection of the dead. But Jesus, so why is that on my mind a little bit? I didn't preach about the second reading yesterday at all. St. Paul's letter to Timothy was the second reading at Sunday Mass this weekend. But in the little excerpt, I just remember kind of studying it a bit, thinking about what I was going to preach about. St. Paul says to us yesterday in his letter to the Romans, remember Jesus Christ raised from the dead, a descendant of David. And so this kind of theme of Paul, from Paul, about who Jesus is. He is descended from David. He's in the Davidic line. He is the King of Israel. He's kind of, that's who Jesus is. He is the Jewish king. And what else about Jesus? He rose from the dead. He lives. He appears to have been slain, but he lives. And so we're going to hear more and more and more about St. Paul's letter to the Romans. And your homework, what's your homework? Read it, all 16 chapters, as if it was written to you, okay? As I like to say, because it was written to you.